In the quiet spaces of our lives, in the moments when the world feels overwhelming, when fear grips our hearts, and the path ahead seems shrouded in uncertainty, where do we turn? Where do we find strength when our own feels depleted? Where do we find refuge when we feel exposed and vulnerable? For centuries, people of faith have turned to the timeless words of Scripture, finding solace, courage, and unwavering hope in the promises of a God who is ever present, ever powerful, and ever faithful to deliver His children. Today, let us immerse ourselves in some of these powerful scriptural narratives and songs of deliverance. Let us allow the ancient voices to speak to our modern struggles, reminding us that the God who acted mightily in the past is the same God who holds our present and future in His hands. We will journey through psalms of personal and corporate deliverance, witness historical accounts of divine intervention, and hear the cry of a soul saved from the very depths. As we listen, may our faith be strengthened, our fears calmed, and our trust in God deepened. We begin with a resounding anthem of thanksgiving and trust, Psalm 118. It opens with a call that echoes through generations. Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good, His love endures forever. This isn't just a polite suggestion, it's a foundational truth, a declaration that grounds us even before we recount the specific ways God has shown up. This enduring love, this steadfast kindness, is the bedrock of our hope. The psalm then invites different groups to affirm this truth: Israel, the house of Aaron, those who fear the Lord, creating a chorus of affirmation, a community united in acknowledging God's eternal love. But the psalm quickly shifts from general praise to personal testimony. The psalmist recounts a time of intense trial. When hard pressed, I cried to the Lord. This is the raw reality of faith. It doesn't exempt us from hardship, from feeling pressured and overwhelmed. But the response to being hard pressed is crucial, crying out to the Lord. And the result? He brought me into a spacious place. What a beautiful image! From being hemmed in, constricted, suffocated by circumstances, the psalmist is brought into freedom, into a place of breadth and ease. This spacious place is more than just physical, it is a spiritual and emotional liberation that comes from God's intervention. With this experience of deliverance, the psalmist can declare with confidence, "The Lord is with me, I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me?" This is not naive optimism, but a conviction born of encounter. Because the Lord is with him, the threats of men, no matter how powerful, lose their ultimate sting. The focus shifts from the potential harm from enemies to the protective presence of God. The Lord is with me. He is my helper. The helper role is active, engaged, powerful. It's not just a distant observer but a present and active ally. This leads to a powerful statement of where true security lies. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in humans. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes. In a world that constantly urges us to rely on human connections, political power, or our own abilities, the psalmist offers a counter-cultural truth. Human strength is fallible, human promises can be broken, even the most powerful earthly figures have limits. But God is the ultimate refuge, the only truly secure place of shelter. The intensity of the struggle is underscored by the imagery of being surrounded. All the nations surrounded me. They surrounded me on every side. They swarmed around me like bees. This paints a picture of being completely besieged, outnumbered, facing overwhelming opposition from every direction. It's a feeling many can relate to when facing a convergence of problems, financial, health, relational, spiritual, that seem to close in. But even in this dire situation, the psalmist's declaration of victory is absolute. But in the name of the Lord, I cut them down. The victory is not achieved by his own strength, but by the authority and power inherent in the name of the Lord. The enemies, though swarming like bees, are consumed as quickly as burning thorns. Their threat, though initially terrifying, is ultimately fleeting and easily vanquished by divine power. There was a moment of near defeat. I was pushed back and about to fall. This acknowledges the precariousness of the situation, the reality of being on the brink of collapse. But right at that moment, the divine intervention occurs. But the Lord helped me. This simple statement is packed with profound truth. God's help arrived precisely when it was most needed, preventing the final fall. Because of this help, the declaration of God's identity becomes even stronger. The Lord is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation. He is not just a source of strength or defense, He is them. And the past deliverance has sealed His role as ultimate salvation. This experience leads to widespread rejoicing. Shouts of joy and victory resound in the tents of the righteous. The personal deliverance has a communal impact, inspiring praise and celebration among all who follow God. The focus returns to God's actions. The Lord's right hand has done mighty things. The Lord's right hand is lifted high. The Lord's right hand has done mighty things. The right hand in Scripture often symbolizes power, authority, and action. This repetition emphasizes the decisive, powerful intervention of God. Because of this, the psalmist declares, "I will not die but live, and will proclaim what the Lord has done." The purpose of deliverance is not just personal survival, but a renewed life dedicated to testifying about God's work. There is also the acknowledgement of God's discipline. The Lord has chastened me severely, but He has not given me over to death. Even the difficult experiences, the chastening hand of God, are seen within the context of His ultimate purpose, not destruction, but leading to life and proclamation. The psalm moves towards an image of entering a sacred space, symbolizing access to God's presence and blessing. "Open for me the gates of the righteous. I will enter and give thanks to the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord, through which the righteous may enter." This speaks to the privilege and access granted to those who are in right relationship with God. Entering implies a movement from the outside to the inside, from struggle to sanctuary, from being hard pressed to offering thanks. The personal gratitude flows freely. "I will give you thanks, for you answered me, you have become my salvation." This reiterates the theme: God's answer to the cry in distress has resulted in salvation. Then comes the well-known verse about the rejected stone. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This verse, later quoted by Jesus Himself, speaks of something seemingly worthless or discarded by human assessment becoming the essential, foundational piece in God's plan. It's a powerful metaphor for how God uses the unexpected and overlooked, perhaps even for how He lifts up those who were pushed back and about to fall. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. God's work is not mundane, it is awe-inspiring, a wonder to behold. The day of God's intervention is marked for celebration. The Lord has done it this very day. Let us rejoice today and be glad. This encourages living in the present reality of God's finished work and finding joy in it. The psalm concludes with a blessing and further praise, reinforcing the goodness and enduring love of God. Psalm 118 is a journey from being utterly surrounded and hard pressed to standing in a spacious place, proclaiming deliverance and giving thanks. It teaches us that in the midst of our battles, our refuge is God, our strength is God, and our salvation comes from God alone. Now let us turn to Psalm 31, a psalm that delves deeper into the anguish of a soul in distress, yet still clinging to hope and trust in God. It begins, like Psalm 118, with a declaration of refuge. In you, Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. The desire is not just for safety but for vindication, for God to act in such a way that the psalmist is not disgraced or defeated in the eyes of others or in his own soul. The prayer is urgent. Deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me. Come quickly to my rescue. When we are in deep trouble, we need God's swift, righteous intervention. The prayer continues using powerful imagery to describe God's role. Be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. These are images of stability, unyielding protection, and impenetrable defense against overwhelming forces. The psalmist reinforces this trust by appealing to God's character and commitment. Since you are my rock and my fortress, for the sake of your name, lead and guide me. Keep me free from the trap that is set for me, for you are my refuge. The plea for guidance and protection from hidden dangers is rooted in the very identity of God as his rock and fortress. Then comes a verse that resonates deeply with faith across the ages. Into your hands I commit my spirit. These words were famously spoken by Jesus on the cross, signifying the ultimate act of trust in the Father, even unto death. For the psalmist, it is an act of surrender and trust in the face of life-threatening circumstances. It is the ultimate declaration that his life, his very being, is safe only in God's keeping, and the prayer is specific. Deliver me, Lord, my faithful God. This acknowledges God's attribute of faithfulness as the basis for hope in deliverance. The psalmist contrasts his trust in God with those who rely on worthless idols. I hate those who cling to worthless idols. As for me, I trust in the Lord. Idols, whether physical images or anything else we put our ultimate hope in apart from God, are empty and cannot save. True trust is placed solely in the Lord. Despite the trust, the reality of his suffering is laid bare. I will be glad and rejoice in your love, for you saw my affliction and knew the anguish of my soul. This is a declaration of future rejoicing rooted in the present knowledge that God is aware of his suffering. God doesn't ignore our pain, he sees it, and he knows the deep anguish within us. The psalmist remembers a past deliverance, likely from Saul or another enemy. You have not given me into the hands of the enemy, but have set my feet in a spacious place. Again, the contrast between being trapped and being set free into a spacious place appears, linking this experience to the theme of deliverance and refuge. But the distress is current and overwhelming. Be merciful to me, Lord, for I am in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief. My life is consumed by anguish and my years by groaning. My strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak. This is a vivid depiction of the physical and emotional toll of suffering. Sorrow affects the eyes, grief weakens the soul and body, anguish consumes life, groaning marks the years, strength fails, bones grow weak. It's a picture of profound weariness and despair. Adding to the suffering is the social rejection. Because of all my enemies, I am the utter contempt of my neighbors, and an object of dread to my closest friends. Those who see me on the street flee from me. I am forgotten as though I were dead. I have become like broken pottery. The pain of affliction is compounded by the pain of isolation and scorn. Neighbors despise him, friends dread him, people avoid him. He feels discarded and broken. This feeling of being an outcast, of being considered useless or dangerous, is a deep wound. He hears the whispers, the terror surrounding him. For I hear many whispering, terror on every side. They conspire against me and plot to take my life. The threats are not just physical but psychological. The whispering campaigns, the fear-mongering, the active plotting against him. It's a terrifying place to be, feeling surrounded by malicious intent. Yet in the face of all this, the core declaration of faith stands firm. But I trust in you, Lord. I say, you are my God. Despite the overwhelming evidence of his suffering and the plots against him, his trust remains in God, and he affirms God's sovereign ownership over him. He declares, my times are in your hands. This is a powerful statement of surrender and trust in God's providence. It acknowledges that the past, present, and future, with all their uncertainties and dangers, are under God's control. The prayer for deliverance continues, focusing on God's active intervention. Deliver me from the hands of my enemies, from those who pursue me. Let your face shine on your servant, save me in your unfailing love. To have God's face shine on someone means to receive his favor, blessing, and protection. The psalmist asks for salvation grounded in God's steadfast, unfailing love. He reiterates his plea for vindication and for the silencing of the wicked. Let me not be put to shame, Lord, for I have cried out to you. But let the wicked be put to shame and be silent in the realm of the dead. Let their lying lips be silenced, for with pride and contempt they speak arrogantly against the righteous. This is a prayer for justice, for the reversal of fortunes where the righteous are upheld and the wicked brought low. Then, in a beautiful shift, the psalmist reflects on the goodness of God towards those who trust him. How abundant are the good things that you have stored up for those who fear you, that you bestow in the sight of all, on those who take refuge in you. Even in the midst of present suffering, the psalmist looks ahead to the future rewards and blessings that God has prepared. God's goodness is not meager. It is abundant and displayed openly for those who fear and take refuge in him. The ultimate protection is found in God's presence. In the shelter of your presence you hide them from all human intrigues. You keep them safe in your dwelling from accusing tongues. God's presence is a sanctuary, a hiding place from the schemes of men and the harm of slander and false accusations. The psalm returns to praise, rooted in past experience. Praise be to the Lord, for he showed me the wonders of his love when I was in a city under siege. Even when surrounded and threatened, God's wonderful love was displayed. There was a moment of doubt. In my alarm I said, I am cut off from your sight. This is the raw honesty of fear, the feeling that God has abandoned us when things are desperate. But faith triumphs. Yet you heard my cry for mercy when I called to you for help. God hears the desperate cry of his children. The psalm concludes with a call to the faithful and a powerful encouragement. Love the Lord, all his faithful people. The Lord preserves those who are true to him, but the proud he pays back in full. Be strong and take heart, all you who hope in the Lord. This is a communal exhortation to love God, trusting that he protects the faithful and deals justly with the proud. The final words are a direct charge to those who place their hope in God, to be strong and take heart. This strength and courage come not from self-effort, but from the sure foundation of hope in the Lord. Psalm 31 reminds us that even when we are overwhelmed by distress, isolation, and fear, our cries are heard, our times are in his hands, and he is our ultimate refuge and source of strength. Moving from a psalm of intense personal suffering and trust, we encounter a triumphant song of deliverance from King David, recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 22. This song recounts God's mighty acts in delivering David from all his enemies, including Saul. It is a powerful testament to God's power, protection, and faithfulness to his anointed. David begins by declaring God's multifaceted role in his life, using a cascade of strong images. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation. He is my stronghold, my refuge, and my Savior. From violent people you save me. Each title speaks of God's strength, stability, protection, and active rescue. He is the unmovable foundation rock, the secure defense, a fortress stronghold, the one who actively sets free, deliverer, savior, the one who wards off attacks, shield, and the symbol of powerful salvation, horn of salvation. These aren't just poetic words, they are descriptions born of countless experiences of God's intervention in David's tumultuous life. David recounts calling out to God in the midst of overwhelming danger. I called to the Lord, who is worthy of praise, and have been saved from my enemies. His calling out is not a passive plea, but an act of faith, calling on the one who is worthy of all honor because he saves. The description of the peril is dramatic. The waves of death swirled about me. The torrents of destruction overwhelmed me. The cords of the grave coiled around me. The snares of death confronted me. This uses the imagery of deep water, flooding, and inescapable traps to convey the feeling of being dragged down into the clutches of death. In this extremity, his response is clear. In my distress I called to the Lord. I called out to my God. From his temple he heard my voice, my cry came to his ears. Even from the brink of death, David's voice reached the heavenly dwelling of God. This emphasizes God's attentiveness and his ability to hear the cries of his children, no matter how dire their circumstances. The response is cosmic and awe-inspiring, portraying God's power unleashed on behalf of his servant. The earth trembled and quaked, and the foundations of the heavens shook. They trembled because he was angry. Smoke rose from his nostrils, consuming fire came from his mouth, burning coals blazed out of it. He parted the heavens and came down, dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew. He soared on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his canopy around him, the dark rain clouds of the sky. Out of the brightness of his presence bolts of lightning blazed forth. The Lord thundered from heaven. The voice of the Most High resounded. He shot his arrows and scattered the enemies. With great bolts of lightning he routed them. The valleys of the sea were exposed, and the foundations of the earth laid bare at the rebuke of the Lord, at the blast of breath from his nostrils. This is anthropomorphic language, describing God's powerful intervention in terms of a storm, a divine warrior descending in terrifying glory. The natural world reacts to his presence. The very foundations of the earth are exposed by his power. His anger against David's enemies is expressed through overwhelming natural forces: smoke, fire, thunder, lightning, scattering and routing the opposition. And in the midst of this divine storm, God's action is personal and specific towards David. He reached down from on high and took hold of me. He drew me out of deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemy, from my foes, who were too strong for me. From the heights of heaven, God extends his hand to the one drowning in the deep waters of trouble and death. He doesn't just observe, he reaches, takes hold, and draws out. He rescues from enemies who were humanly insurmountable. The reason for this divine favor is deeply personal. They confronted me in the day of my disaster, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. The day the enemy chose to strike, God stepped in as David's support, and the result is the familiar theme, brought out of confinement into a spacious place. The reason given is profoundly moving. God rescued him because he delighted in him. This reminds us that God's actions are not solely based on our merit, but often flow from his sovereign love and delight in his children. David reflects on God's faithfulness in dealing with him according to his uprightness. The Lord has dealt with me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands. He has rewarded me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord. I am not guilty of turning from my God. All his laws are before me. I have not turned away from his decrees. I have been blameless before him, and have kept myself from sin. The Lord has rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to my cleanness in his sight. While salvation is ultimately by grace, David here speaks from the perspective of the covenant God made with Israel, where faithfulness brought blessing and protection. He asserts his loyalty and obedience, seeing God's deliverance as a reward for his commitment. He then broadens the principle of God's dealings with people. To the faithful you show yourself faithful. To the blameless you show yourself blameless. To the pure you show yourself pure. But to the devious you show yourself shrewd. You save the humble, but your eyes are on the haughty to bring them low. God acts in accordance with his character and responds to the character of people. He is faithful to the faithful, pure to the pure, and humble to the humble, while opposing the proud and devious. David returns to personal testimony of God's empowerment. You, Lord, are my lamp. The Lord turns my darkness into light. In times of confusion, despair, or danger, God provides guidance and hope, dispelling the darkness. With your help I can advance against a troop. With my God I can scale a wall. This is a powerful statement of empowered strength. What is impossible alone, facing an army, overcoming an obstacle like a high wall, is possible with God's help. He reiterates God's perfect character and protective nature. A is for God, his way is perfect, the Lord's word is flawless. He shields all who take refuge in him. God's character is without fault. His promises are sure, and he is a shield for all who seek safety in him. The rhetorical questions emphasize God's uniqueness. For who is God besides the Lord, and who is the rock except our God? There is no other like him, no other true rock of strength and stability. The physical empowerment continues. It is God who arms me with strength and keeps my way secure. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He causes me to stand on the heights. He trains my hands for battle. My arms can bend a bow of bronze. God provides the internal strength, the stability to navigate difficult terrains. Feet like a deer, stand on the heights, and the physical ability for conflict, trains my hands, bend a bow of bronze. All his capabilities are gifts from God. You make your saving help my shield. Your help has made me great. God's salvation is a protective shield, and his assistance has led to David's exaltation. You provide a broad path for my feet, so that my ankles do not give way. God clears the way and provides stability, preventing him from stumbling. David recounts his victory over enemies, attributing it entirely to God's strength and provision. I pursued my enemies and crushed them. I did not turn back till they were destroyed. I crushed them completely, and they could not rise. They fell beneath my feet. You armed me with strength for battle. You humbled my adversaries before me. You made my enemies turn their backs in flight, and I destroyed my foes. This vivid description of military victory is presented as a direct result of God arming him, humbling his enemies, and causing them to flee. The helplessness of his enemies highlights God's unique power. They cried for help, but there was no one to save them. To the Lord, but he did not answer. Their cries were futile, because they were not directed to the true source of salvation, or were not in accordance with his will. I beat them as fine as the dust of the earth. I pounded and trampled them like mud in the streets. This graphic imagery emphasizes the totality of their defeat. The song culminates in a declaration of God's role in raising David up. You have delivered me from the attacks of the peoples. You have preserved me as the head of nations. People I did not know now serve me. Foreigners cower before me. As soon as they hear of me, they obey me. They all lose heart. they come trembling from their strongholds. God's deliverance led to David's establishment as king over Israel and other nations, bringing him respect and fear from foreigners. This elevation is God's doing. The song ends with fervent praise, echoing the beginning but with the added weight of recounted experience. The Lord lives! Praise be to my rock! Exalted be my God, the rock my Savior! He is the God who avenges me, who puts the nations under me, who sets me free from my enemies. You exalted me above my foes, from a violent man you rescued me. David celebrates God's active, living reality and exalts him as his unchanging source of strength and salvation. God's avenging nature and his power to subdue nations are acknowledged as part of his role in delivering his servant. Therefore I will praise you, Lord. Among the nations, I will sing the praises of your name. David's deliverance is not just for his own benefit, but is a testimony to be shared with the world. The final verses point to God's enduring promise to David's lineage. He gives his king great victories. He shows unfailing kindness to his anointed, to David and his descendants forever. This connects David's personal experience to God's broader covenant faithfulness, ultimately pointing towards the Messiah, the ultimate anointed king. 2 Samuel 22 is a magnificent ode to God as the ultimate warrior and deliverer, who hears the cry of his servant, descends in power, rescues from overwhelming danger, empowers for victory, and establishes him for his purposes. It reminds us that when God fights for us, no enemy is too strong. From the intensely personal and the royally triumphant, we move to a panoramic view of God's deliverance across different human predicaments, as portrayed in Psalm 107. This psalm is a powerful collection of testimonies about God's unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. It begins with a call for the redeemed to give thanks and tell their story. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story, those he redeemed from the hand of the foe, those he gathered from the lands, from east and west, from north and south. This sets the stage for stories of rescue, specifically from the hand of the foe and from dispersion. The psalm then presents 4 distinct scenarios of human trouble and God's subsequent deliverance, each following a similar pattern: the situation of distress, the crying out to the Lord, and God's rescue, followed by a call to give thanks and praise. Scenario 1: Teen wanderers in the desert. Some wandered in desert wastelands, finding no way to a city where they could settle. They were hungry and thirsty, and their lives ebbed away. This describes physical hardship, being lost, without provision, and facing death by starvation and thirst. It paints a picture of disorientation, vulnerability, and slow decline. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He led them by a straight way to a city where they could settle. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind, for he satisfies the thirsty and fills the hungry with good things. Their cry in distress led to God's guidance and provision, leading them to safety and satisfying their deepest needs. Scenario 2: Prisoners in darkness. Some sat in darkness, in utter darkness, prisoners suffering in iron chains, because they rebelled against God's commands and despised the plans of the Most High. So he subjected them to bitter labor, they stumbled, and there was no one to help. This describes spiritual and physical bondage, self-inflicted through rebellion against God's will. They are in deep darkness, suffering, and without human aid. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He brought them out of darkness, the utter darkness, and broke away their chains. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. for he breaks down gates of bronze and cuts through bars of iron. Their cry led to salvation from distress, liberation from physical and spiritual darkness, and the breaking of insurmountable barriers. Scenario 3: Fools afflicted by sin. Some became fools through their rebellious ways and suffered affliction because of their iniquities. They loathed all food and drew near the gates of death. This describes the consequences of sin, leading to self-destructive behavior, physical illness, and being close to death. Their trouble is a direct result of their own foolishness and iniquity. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He sent out his word and healed them. He rescued them from the grave. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. Let them sacrifice thank offerings and tell of his works with songs of joy. Their cry led to God sending his powerful word to heal them and rescue them from the brink of death. Scenario 4: Sailors in a storm. Some went out on the sea in ships. They were merchants on the mighty waters. They saw the works of the Lord, his wonderful deeds in the deep. For he spoke and stirred up a tempest that lifted high the waves. They mounted up to the heavens and went down to the depths. In their peril, their courage melted away. They reeled and staggered like drunkards. They were at their wits' end. This describes danger faced by those going about their normal business, encountering the terrifying power of nature. They are physically tossed about. Their courage fails. They are confused and desperate. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad when it grew calm, and he guided them to their desired haven. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. Let them exalt him in the assembly of the people and praise him in the council of the elders. Their cry led to God directly intervening in nature, calming the storm and guiding them safely to their destination. After these 4 specific examples, the psalm continues with further illustrations of God's power over nature and human circumstances, showing how he can transform landscapes and alter the fortunes of people, humbling the proud and lifting the needy. He turned rivers into a desert. He turned the desert into pools of water. He brought the hungry to live. He blessed them, and their numbers greatly increased. Then their numbers decreased, and they were humbled by oppression, calamity, and sorrow. But he lifted the needy out of their affliction, and increased their families like flocks. This broader perspective shows God's sovereignty over all of life's circumstances, bringing both judgment and blessing, desolation and flourishing. The psalm concludes with a call to wisdom and reflection. The upright see and rejoice, but all the wicked shut their mouths. Let the one who is wise heed these things, and ponder the loving deeds of the Lord. The wise person observes these patterns of God's judgment and deliverance, finding understanding and prompting deeper contemplation of God's steadfast love and actions. Psalm 107 is a powerful reminder that no matter the specific nature of our trouble, whether it's being lost, imprisoned, sick due to sin, or facing forces beyond our control, when we cry out to the Lord, he is able and willing to deliver us according to his unfailing love and wonderful deeds. It encourages us to remember his past acts of deliverance and to tell our own stories of how he has shown up for us. Now let us turn from the poetic and historical accounts in the Psalms and Samuel to a foundational narrative of national deliverance, the parting of the Red Sea in Exodus chapter 14. This is a story of God's dramatic intervention, demonstrating his power to save his people from overwhelming military might. The scene is set by God himself, Tell the Israelites to turn back and camp near Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. They are to camp by the sea, directly opposite Baal-zephon. God intentionally directs the Israelites to a location where they will appear trapped, hemmed in by the desert and the sea. He knows Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh will think, the Israelites are wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And God's purpose is clear. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. This is a divine setup, designed to display God's power and sovereignty to both the Israelites and the Egyptians. Pharaoh, hearing that the Israelites have fled, has a change of heart and regrets letting them go, seeing their departure as a loss of valuable labor. So, with great military force, 600 of the best chariots, and all the others, with officers he pursues them. God again hardens his heart, ensuring the pursuit will lead to the confrontation he planned. The chase is successful. The Egyptians pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-zephon. The trap is sprung, and, as Pharaoh's army approaches, the Israelites look up and see their former masters marching after them. Their reaction is immediate and understandable. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. Fear grips them, and their cry is born of panic. Their fear quickly turns to bitter complaint against Moses. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Their fear is so overwhelming that they prefer the known bondage of Egypt to the terrifying unknown of the desert and the approaching army, even with freedom in sight. In this moment of panic and accusation, Moses stands firm and delivers one of the most powerful statements of faith and assurance in the Old Testament. Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, you need only to be still." This is a command to overcome fear. Do not be afraid, to maintain position, stand firm, and a promise of divine action. You will see the deliverance. The Lord will fight for you. The key instruction is, you need only to be still. In moments of overwhelming crisis, when every instinct screams to run or fight in our own strength, God's command is often to wait, to trust, to be still and let Him act. God then addresses Moses directly, prompting him to move beyond crying out and take action, according to God's instructions. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." God's response to Moses crying out, though Moses' words to the people were full of faith, seems to be a gentle rebuke, or perhaps a prompt to move from prayer to action based on the plan already in motion. He reiterates his purpose, gaining glory, and revealing his identity to the Egyptians through this dramatic event. Then comes the incredible, supernatural intervention. First, a visible sign of God's protective presence. Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night the cloud brought darkness to the one side and light to the other. So neither went near the other all night long. God's presence, which had been leading them, now strategically positions itself years behind them, creating a barrier that provided light for Israel and darkness and confusion for the pursuing Egyptians. Then the sea parts. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind, and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. God uses both a natural force, east wind, and a supernatural act, dividing the waters to create an impossible escape route. The sea, their apparent barrier and impending tomb, becomes their path to freedom. They walk through on dry ground, protected by walls of water on either side, a terrifying yet miraculous display of God's control over creation. The Egyptians, blinded by darkness and hardened in heart, foolishly pursue them into the sea. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. God continues to throw them into confusion. During the last watch of the night the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. God actively disrupts their military advance. Recognizing their folly and God's power, the Egyptians finally understand. And the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites!" The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. The display of divine power is undeniable. God's stated purpose of gaining glory and revealing himself is being fulfilled. The final act of deliverance is swift and decisive. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. As the Israelites reached the other side, the sea returned, not slowly, but sweeping the entire Egyptian army away. Their defeat was total and final. The outcome for Israel is profound. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with the wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. They were not only saved, but witnessed the complete destruction of their oppressors. The experience had a lasting impact. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant. Witnessing God's mighty deliverance led to reverence and trust. The Red Sea narrative is a powerful testament to God's ability to make a way where there is no way, to fight for his people when they are helpless, and to use even the most dire circumstances to display his glorious power and secure their deliverance. It is a story that echoes the truth. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Finally, let us descend into the depths with the prophet Jonah, experiencing a deliverance that is both intensely personal and profoundly symbolic, as recorded in Jonah chapter 2. This is a story of crying out to God not from danger on land or sea, but from the belly of a great fish, from the very brink of death. Jonah had been swallowed by the fish after fleeing God's command, thrown overboard by sailors in a storm that God sent. Now, from the most unlikely and desperate location imaginable, Jonah prays, From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. This reminds us that there is no place so deep, so dark, so seemingly cut off, that God cannot hear our cry. Jonah's prayer is a lament and a testimony, recounting his experience and expressing his hope. He begins by acknowledging his cry and God's response. He said, "In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead I called for help, and you listened to my cry." Jonah recognizes that his situation is akin to being in Sheol, the realm of the dead. His cry was not just physical, but from the depths of spiritual and existential despair. Yet, God heard him. He describes the overwhelming nature of his situation, using vivid aquatic imagery. "You hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me, all your waves and breakers swept over me." He acknowledges that this was God's doings. "You hurled me," a consequence of his disobedience. The imagery of being overwhelmed by waves and currents paints a picture of complete helplessness, being tossed about by forces far beyond his control. His despair is palpable. "I said, I have been banished from your sight." He feels cut off from God's presence, expelled from his favor. This feeling of abandonment can be the most painful part of deep suffering. Yet, hope remains. "Yet I will look again toward your holy temple." Despite feeling banished, his gaze of faith is directed towards God's dwelling place, the symbol of his presence, and the place where atonement is made. He continues to describe the physical and metaphorical descent into death. "The engulfing waters threatened me. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever." The water threatens life. The deep encloses him. The seaweed symbolizes being entangled and pulled down, sinking to the roots of the mountains. And being barred in forever suggests being at the very bottom, imprisoned with no possibility of escape, facing certain death. But in this absolute low point, the turning point occurs, marked by a powerful, but you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit of despair, from the depths of the sea, from the very brink of death. God intervened. Jonah's life was brought back. The rescue was entirely God's action. The moment of remembrance and prayer was key. "When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple." As his life was draining away, in his final moments, Jonah remembered the Lord. This act of remembrance sparked prayer, and his prayer, even from the belly of the fish, reached God's heavenly temple. He reflects on the folly of idolatry compared to God's steadfast love. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. This is a stark contrast to his own experience. While clinging to idols leads away from God's love, and ultimately offers nothing, turning to God, even from the depths of despair, connects one to his saving love. His experience leads to a vow and a declaration of salvation. "But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will make good. I will say, salvation comes from the Lord." Delivered from the impossible, Jonah resolves to offer sacrifices of thanksgiving and fulfill his vows. His ultimate theological conclusion, drawn from this extraordinary experience, is simple yet profound. Salvation comes from the Lord. It doesn't come from human effort, from escaping the fish himself, or from any other source. Salvation, in its totality, rescue from death, restoration to life, reconciliation with God, originates solely from the Lord. The story concludes with God's direct command and Jonah's physical deliverance. "And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land." God's sovereignty extends even to the creatures of the sea, commanding them to fulfill his purposes. Jonah's deliverance was not a natural occurrence. but a miraculous act of God's power, depositing him safely back on land. The story of Jonah is a vivid illustration of God's power to save from the most desperate circumstances. It reminds us that even when our own choices lead us into deep trouble, when we feel completely cut off and facing certain death, crying out to God from the depths, remembering Him, and directing our hope towards Him, can bring about salvation that is entirely His doing. It reinforces the truth that God is the God of deliverance, able to rescue us from any pit. Bringing these powerful scriptures together, we see a consistent theme running through them all. God is our ultimate source of strength, refuge, deliverance, and salvation. Whether we are hard-pressed and surrounded, Psalm 11, overwhelmed by personal distress and scorn, Psalm 31, facing powerful enemies, 2 Samuel 22, lost, imprisoned, sick, or caught in life's storm, Psalm 107, trapped by insurmountable obstacles, Exodus 14, or plunged into the deepest pit of despair, Jonah 2. In every scenario, the path to deliverance begins with turning to the Lord, crying out to Him, and placing our trust and hope in Him. These scriptures are not just ancient history or beautiful poetry. They are living words that speak to our present realities. Are you feeling hard pressed today? Cry out to the Lord. He will bring you into a spacious place. Do you feel overwhelmed by distress and forgotten? Commit your times into His hands. He knows your anguish and is your refuge. Are you facing enemies or challenges that seem too strong? Remember that God is your rock, your fortress, your deliverer. He will fight for you. Are you lost, trapped, sick, or in a storm? Cry out to the Lord in your trouble. He will save you from your distress. Do you feel like you are in the deepest pit, cut off and losing hope? Remember the Lord and call out to Him. He can bring your life up from the pit, because salvation comes from the Lord. Let the message of these scriptures penetrate your heart. God's love endures forever. He is attentive to your cry. He is mighty to save. He makes a way where there is no way. He empowers you to overcome. He is your shield, your stronghold, your salvation. Your times are in His hands. His unfailing love is abundant for those who take refuge in Him. He delights in rescuing His children. As you face the challenges of life, remember these divine rescues. Let them build your faith and deepen your trust. Do not be afraid. Stand firm. Be still. The Lord will fight for you. Place your hope firmly in Him, your rock and your Redeemer. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever, ready to display His wonderful deeds for mankind, for you, for me. May we, like the redeemed of the Lord, be those who tell our story, giving thanks to the Lord, for He is good, and His love endures forever. Amen.